There's a specific kind of Gen X man who used to chase. He chased in bars in the 90s, chased across 3 area codes on a landline, chased through the first wave of online dating when your profile was a paragraph and a pixelated photo taken by your friend at a barbecue. He chased through a marriage, maybe 2, and now, sometime between 45 and 60, he stopped. Not because he gave up, not because he swore anything off. He just walked out of the whole game one Tuesday and forgot to walk back in. I'm Frank, and if that man is you, or the man in your life, the psychology behind that stillness is stranger and more revealing than anyone gives it credit for. Start with what he actually does now, because the behavior is the tell. He doesn't pursue. When a woman shows interest, he clocks it, appreciates it, and does nothing. He doesn't swipe with any real intent. The app is on his phone, sure, but he opens it like he opens the weather. He doesn't re-partner after a split, even though the split was 3, 4, 7 years ago. He goes to the wedding alone. He goes to the funeral alone. He goes to dinner with his brother and his brother's wife, and he's fine. He is genuinely, verifiably fine. And that fineness is the thing that makes everyone around him uneasy, because nobody can tell if it's peace or something wearing peace like a jacket. Here's where the data gets interesting, because the numbers actually back up his instinct that he is not alone in this. Pew Research, working off a 2022 survey, found that half of single Americans between 50 and 64 aren't looking for a relationship or even casual dates. 3/4 of singles 65 and older aren't looking either. So when a Gen X man in this bracket tells you he's just not out there right now, he's not being coy. He's describing the statistical center of his own age group. The room he's standing in is full of people doing exactly what he's doing, which is nothing. But it gets weirder. Under 40, single men outnumber single women. Over 50, that flips. Pew's numbers show that among Americans 50 to 64, 28% of men describe themselves as single compared to 30% of women, basically even. But by 65 and up, only 25% of men are single versus 39% of women. Which means the Gen X man who isn't chasing is, statistically, more likely to be quietly attached than the woman his age is. He is not the last picked in gym class. He's the one who already got picked and decided he was done playing. And whether he's coupled or not, the wanting has cooled off across the board. Pew tracked the share of single Americans who say they're looking for a relationship or casual dating, and it dropped from 49% in 2019 to 42% in 2022. The drop was sharper among men. Something happened in those 3 years that made a lot of men, especially older men, quietly close the tab. So what is the tab they closed? Walk it backwards. Behavior first, then psychology. He stopped pursuing. Why? Option 1, and the one he'll tell you if you ask him at a barbecue with a beer in his hand, he's tired. Dating burnout is the phrase everyone uses now, and Match ran their 14th Singles in America survey with the Kinsey Institute in 2025. 5,001 U.S. singles from 18 to 98. And 53% of them reported dating burnout. 46% said they were focused on self-improvement instead. That's not just Gen X, but the frame fits him neatly. He hit the apps, he did the coffee dates, he did the 3-week text runs that dissolved into nothing, and his nervous system pulled the plug. Focused on self-improvement is what a guy says when he's decided the juice is not worth the squeeze. That's the version of the story he tells at the barbecue. It's not wrong, but it's not the whole thing. Option 2 lives underneath option 1, and this is where you have to be careful because it's not flattering and it's not simple. There's a body of attachment research that keeps finding the same thing at every life stage. Men score higher on attachment avoidance than women. Consistently. 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Avoidance means you handle closeness by keeping distance. You self-soothe by pulling back. You're the guy who needs a lot of alone time, who processes by going quiet, who feels flooded when someone wants more
of you than you're ready to give. And when a relationship ends, especially a long one, an avoidant guy doesn't usually go looking for the next one. He goes looking for silence. And silence, for him, feels like relief. That's the part that trips everyone up, because relief and peace are not the same thing. Relief is the absence of pressure. Peace is the presence of contentment. From the outside, they can look identical. Here's the part that stopped me when I read it. There's a longitudinal study, the Vietnam-era Twin Study of Aging, published in a 2024 paper, that tracked 1,275 community-dwelling men from age 56 to age 68. So, essentially, Gen X and early boomer men through the exact window we're talking about. What they found is that midlife attachment avoidance predicted mild cognitive impairment at 68. The statistical relationship was there in the data. And the mechanism that connected the avoidance to the decline was social isolation. The men who kept everyone at arm's length in their 50s were the men whose brains and bodies were more likely to be struggling by their late 60s. The avoidance didn't stay a personality trait. It converted into something physical. Fewer people in the room, less cognitive scaffolding, more frailty. You feel that one, right? Because the guy who stopped chasing, the guy who's fine, is often also the guy who stopped calling his friends, stopped joining things, stopped saying yes to the dinner. And he'll tell you the same story. I'm just at a stage where I like my own company, which is true, and also possibly the beginning of a slow leak he can't see yet. AARP published a Gen X friendship study aimed at men over 50. What they found is Gen X men report feeling lonelier than boomer men do at the same age. 95% of men say friends are essential to a happy life, and yet, men are less likely than women to go to religious services monthly, 32% versus 39%. Less likely to volunteer over the course of a year, 30% versus 37%. Less likely to belong to a community group. So he knows friends matter. He believes it. He can articulate it. And then he goes home and doesn't text anyone. This is the shape of the thing. He's not chasing women, and he's also not chasing his old friends, and he's also not chasing membership in anything. The not chasing is a whole posture. Romantic disinterest is just the part everyone else notices first because it's the socially visible one. Nobody throws you a party for not joining the Rotary Club. But everyone notices when you show up alone to the wedding again. Now, before somebody misreads me, this is not me saying every Gen X man who's single is emotionally damaged and shrinking his brain. That would be a stupid, insulting flattening of a whole lot of real, considered choices people make. Plenty of guys in this bracket looked at the terrain honestly and said, no thanks. That's a legitimate read. The point is that the same behavior, not chasing, can come from two completely different places, and from the outside, they look identical. One version is a man who knows what he wants, has done the work, and doesn't need a partner to feel whole. The other version is a man who's protecting himself from something he never named, and calling it freedom. Both of them will use the same words to describe it: peace, contentment, being past all that. The way you tell the difference is not what he says. It's what else is going on around him. If he's not chasing romance, but he's calling his brother every week, going to the gym with the same 3 guys, showing up to his kids' stuff, in a book club he pretends to hate, texting his oldest friend memes, the not chasing is probably real peace. He's got a full life. He doesn't need to bolt a partner onto it right now. If he's not chasing romance and he's also not chasing anything else, His social calendar is his job, his couch, and a podcast. The not chasing is probably the avoidance jacket. It looks like peace because it's quiet, but quiet and healthy are not the same word. Let's talk about the divorce piece, because you can't tell this story without it. Gray divorce is the term for divorce among people 50 and older, and it's not a small phenomenon anymore. Bowling Green's National Center for Family and Marriage Research reports that in 1990, only about 8% of all divorces involve someone 50 or older. Today, that share is close to 40%. Pew, tracking women 50 and up, shows the divorce rate went from 3.9 per 1,000 in 1990 to 11.0 in 2008. It was 10.3 in 2023. So it doubled twice over and then flattened out. That plateau matters. The gray divorce wave already crested. The people it swept up are now living in the aftermath. And here's where the Gen X man does something the women his age don't do at the same rate. Research using the Health and Retirement Study, Brown, Lynn, and Hammersmith, found that within 10 years of a gray divorce, about 37% of men had repartnered. For women, that number was 22%. So men do come back to relationships after a late divorce, more often than women. But, and this is the part that gets ignored, the majority don't. 63% of gray divorced men are still on their own a decade later. And when men do repartner, they lean toward cohabitation over remarriage. They want the company. They're less interested in the paperwork. So you've got a Gen X man in his 50s who went through a divorce at some point in his 40s or 50s. He's statistically more likely than his ex-wife to have found someone new, if that's the road he took. But if he didn't take that road, if he's in the 63%, he's probably not planning to. The window in which men most actively repartner after a gray divorce is the first few years. If he's 5 or 7 years out and still alone and not looking, the not looking has become the plan. It's stopped being a phase. And this is where I want to zoom in on something specific about this generation, because context matters. The Survey Center on American Life ran a piece by Daniel Cox on the romance gap. And one of the numbers in there is that 76% of Gen Xers report having had a boyfriend or girlfriend as teenagers. Compare that to 56% of Gen Z adults now. So the Gen X man we're talking about grew up dating in person. He passed notes. He asked girls to dances by picking up a phone attached to a wall, hoping her dad didn't answer. He learned rejection with a face across from him. He learned attraction with a body next to his in a car. He is fluent, genuinely fluent, in a form of dating that basically doesn't exist anymore. And then, at some point in his 30s or 40s, the whole thing migrated to a phone screen. And the phone screen has different physics. You can't read a face. You can't smell somebody. You can't tell if the way she laughs at your joke is real. The signal-to-noise ratio he grew up trusting got scrambled. Psychology Today ran a piece framing this as choice overload and perfectionism eating older daters alive. Too many options, none of them satisfying. All of them creating the sense that the next swipe might be better, which means the current one never is. For a guy whose romantic instincts were forged in a world of maybe 3 plausible partners in a 100-mile radius, being handed a buffet of 10,000 faces breaks the instrument he uses to make decisions. So he puts the instrument down. That's not weakness. That's calibration failure. His radar was tuned for a different environment. When the environment changed, The radar started giving him garbage readings, and eventually he stopped consulting it. So now stack all this up. He came up dating in person. The tools got replaced. He may have gone through a long marriage that ended somewhere in the gray divorce wave. He's statistically likely to be in the half of 50 to 64-year-old singles who aren't looking. If he is looking, he's in a smaller and smaller pool of men who are, because the share of men actively seeking dates has been dropping. His baseline attachment style, on average, runs more avoidant than the women in his age group. And avoidance, followed out over a decade or two, quietly shrinks the number of people in his life, which the research suggests has downstream effects on his brain and body he probably isn't tracking. That is the Gen X man who doesn't chase. Not one guy. A whole ecosystem of pressures, timings, and personal wiring that ends in the same posture. Hands in pockets, at ease, not moving. Now here's what I actually want to leave you with, because I don't want this to land as a diagnosis. It's not one. If you're that man, or you love that man, the question isn't, should he be dating? Dating is not a moral requirement. Plenty of people live full, sharp, connected lives without a romantic partner. The question is whether the not chasing sits inside a life that has other people threaded all the way through it. Whether there are still voices in the house, literal or over the phone. Whether somebody would notice fast if something went wrong. Whether the peace is real or just quiet. Because the men in that longitudinal study didn't get in trouble because they were single. They got in trouble because they were isolated. Those are different words. You can be one without the other. What matters is that the door stays open. To friends, to family, to the guy at the hardware store, to the neighbor with the dog, to the sister who calls too much. Not chasing women is a choice. Not chasing anyone at all is a slow drift. And drift is very hard to feel while it's happening. The Gen X man who stopped chasing isn't broken. He might be exactly where he wants to be. He also might be somewhere he never actually chose, somewhere the current carried him while he was looking at his phone. Only he knows which. And the honest answer usually comes not from asking himself if he's happy, but from asking himself who he'd call at 11 on a Wednesday night if something went sideways. If he has an answer, and the answer picks up, he's fine. If the question feels hard, that's the tell. That's the whole thing. Go watch the one playing on the screen right now. I think it's the right one for you. Actually, wait. Before you click off, let me sit on that last thought one more beat, because I think it's the part that matters most, and I moved past it too fast. Who would you call at 11 on a Wednesday night? Not a hypothetical crisis, not the hospital, not the tow truck, just you're up, something is sitting on your chest, and you want a voice. Not a therapist voice, not a professional voice. A voice that already knows your history and won't need the backstory. The Gen X man who's genuinely at peace has 3 or 4 names that pop up before he even finishes the question. The Gen X man who's wearing peace like a jacket has to think about it. And when he thinks about it, he starts qualifying. Well, so-and-so goes to bed early. So-and-so has his own stuff going on. So-and-so and I kind of lost touch. That qualifying is the sound of a life that is quietly narrowed while he was busy calling the narrowing freedom. And listen, narrowing is fixable. That's the part I want you to hear.
The VETSA data is grim if you stop reading at the middle. But the mechanism the researchers identified is social isolation. And social isolation is one of the only risk factors in aging that you can move the needle on this week. Not this decade, this week. Text one person. Say the dumb thing. Suggest the coffee. Go to the thing you were going to skip. The not chasing doesn't have to mean not reaching. Those are two different muscles, and the second one keeps working long after the first one goes quiet. That's actually the whole thing. The video on the screen, go watch that one next.